that's something that I've really been pushing for, is for, businesses to take a much more of a practical approach to their staff and actually have a connection with them and understand what they're going through and how they're feeling at work.
I'm Dani Valent, and this is Dirty Linen, the podcast that takes the issues the hospitality industry finds hard to air in public and shakes them all about. George Wintle is a young chef who was a chef de partie at Oakridge, and he reached out to me probably a month ago now because he was doing a forum as part of his Eat the Issue series around mental health at hospitality. I was really impressed. He's a young chef, and I just thought, wow, someone who's so young but so active in this space is obviously going to be in the industry for a long time and make some great changes. But, our forum, I think, was going to be next Monday. That didn't happen. George isn't even in Melbourne anymore. Things change in the COVID times, don't they?
Oh, God, yeah. You can never predict anything. I think key thing from this year is try not to make too many plans.
That's it. So, George, tell me where you are right now and tell me the circumstances in which you find yourself.
I've just moved up to the Blue Mountains to undertake a new role up there. So I'm currently in 2 weeks of isolation, which has been okay so far. It's only been 3 days, so I'm still keeping positive and staying mentally strong. So, yeah, so far so good.
It's so interesting. It's you don't feel very clean as a Melburnian at the moment, do you? Nobody wants us.
Not at all. I'd heard quite a few stories of some Victorians being in New South Wales, just a couple of days before we went into quarantine, and, even them coming back, a day or two after quarantine had already started in Melbourne. There were a lot of restaurants that actually kicked them back just because they were from Victoria, didn't even really worry about where they'd been before or anything like that. But I assumed that I'd have somewhat of the same reception, but fortunately I haven't encountered anything like that yet. So, yeah, heads are up.
That's good. And you've moved there for a job, right?
Yeah. I can't really say too much yet, as it hasn't really been publicised much, but I'm really excited to kind of put my skills to the test up here and to put my knowledge into action.
Fantastic. So tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to be interested in the issue of mental health in hospitality.
Well, yeah, so I am quite a young chef. I'm fairly new to the industry. I'm 22, so I started my apprenticeship when I was 17, so it's only been, five or so years in the industry. I've been really fortunate to find myself working with some incredible people. Most recently at Oakridge with Matt and Joe. That was a place that I felt really, really, really special to be a part of. Matt and Joe, especially around mental health, really looked out for everyone in the kitchen and the restaurant. So
I'll just leap in and say, George, Matt Stone and Joe Barrett, for anybody who doesn't know. And Oakridge is a winery restaurant in the Yarra Valley, so about an hour outside of Melbourne. And I guess there's so much there that's focused around the garden and about the region. It's just lunches. So I suppose there's an opportunity to work at a reasonable pace, and they seem very much focused on having a life as well as being hard at work. So would you say that's a fair explanation of the place?
Oh, absolutely. And, having that work-life balance, that allowed Matt and Joe to really get the Oakridge name up and running, outside of the kitchen. But there was also a really strong encouragement for all of us in the kitchen and the restaurant as well to build our profile at the same time. So, yeah, they were always motivating us, trying to push us to do more, not even just for the Oakridge brand, but for ourselves and our futures as well.
That's fantastic. But you found that some of your friends were not so fortunate in their workplaces.
I did. And that's where, Eat the Issue was born, essentially. There was one of my friends who was struggling quite a bit and, found themselves in hospital, struggling quite a bit. And when I visited them, hearing their story and, their history. It was really disheartening to think that goes on in hospitality. I felt so fortunate to be working in a place where I was, where I was so cared about, and there was so much attention put into not only me but everyone in the kitchen. It made me really want to speak up and try and start advocating, I guess, for positive mental health in restaurants.
So when you say that that would happen, what were you talking about that your friend had encountered or experienced in her workplace?
A lot of abuse, which led to substance abuse and other forms of self-harm, which was never okay in any situation. And I think for a business to kind of let that run and let that go unnoticed is not good whatsoever. And that's something that I've really been pushing for, is for businesses to take a much more of a practical approach to their staff and actually have a connection with them and understand what they're going through and how they're feeling at work.
I mean, that's a lot to take on to, create that sort of industry-wide change. So, I mean, how did you break that down into bite-sized pieces or, actions?
Good question. I always like taking on a lot. I feel as though if I'm ever sitting still, I'm just not very active. So I tried to take on as much as I could. So setting up the issue, just the foundation of it, took quite a bit of time. But having the support of Victor Leong, which I held my first event at Lee Ho Fook, was phenomenal, and he really guided me through event planning, which I think was one of the main things that I'd never really encountered before. So he was a really great mentor in that aspect. And also my mum, Rae Bonney, she's a very large figure within the mental health space in Australia and if not the world. So she I've always kind of been around mental health and listening to the work that she does. I've always felt that sense of, I've always wanted to make change in that aspect, because, hearing some of the stories that, she would mention to us was really disheartening. And when I encountered one of my friends that was going through something that bad, it really made me want to do something for my industry that I love so much.
That's so interesting. So what's your mum's role?
To be honest, she does so much. I always ask her, I'm like, what do you actually do? But her role entails so much. She does a lot. She is an independent business, so to speak. She does a lot around mental health plans, and especially in the construction and infrastructure industries. So always going out to work sites or large spaces where there's a lot of men, key examples of people who don't really speak out about their mental health or well-being at all. So she's always there, encouraging them to kind of feel comfortable with speaking out and giving them a mentally healthy space to speak out in.
Okay. I mean, it's so interesting because you're quite an unusual person in that talking about mental health was just normal for you. And you had this example with your mum that, it was just a thing that you needed to deal with and you needed to create safe spaces. But so many people that come into restaurant kitchens don't have that upbringing and that feeling, and perhaps the restaurant culture doesn't support them to speak openly about mental health. And so Eat the Issue is, what is it? What is Eat the Issue?
I see it more as a platform for people to come out and, creating a space for people to feel comfortable and to talk to other people from the industry about potential struggles they're having with themselves, or even business owners can come and, bounce ideas off each other about how to create a mentally healthy space in their restaurants. So always inviting not mental health professionals, restaurant leaders to come and talk about how they manage their staff and also themselves, because I feel as though, the people who we all look up to almost seem bulletproof. They never appear to let anything affect them, but, at the end of the day, they're the ones who, kind of get left in the dark when it comes to their own mental health and forgotten about. so to say. So I think it was really cool to kind of open up a platform for them to talk to each other, and also for, people like me who were just cooking along. And you always find some speed bumps in the road, and just to have someone to talk to, or just get a few more ideas about how to manage your mental health is a really good thing.
Okay, so currently you're in quarantine. You're going to be there for a couple of weeks, and we're all not living our normal lives at the moment. But what do you think, that we could do in this current situation that might help us deal with it in the first place, and also come out the other side better prepared and mentally stronger?
I think upskilling is a really good thing in this point in time. Doing things at home, just starting a few projects here and there. It's a really good time to just give things a crack. There's no one judging anything except for you. So try something wild and different that you've never done before. I think that's a really cool thing. And there's a few people around that have really kind of taken this by the balls and given it a red hot crack, like Nabil Ansari from Sunda. Looking at how successful he's come out of this is really inspiring and really uplifting to know that it's that just because our industry is almost falling apart, that there's still hope. And just because there's no restaurants there doesn't mean we should stop and sit still and wait for it to get better.
Yeah, so if anyone hasn't caught up with what Nabil's doing, he's an Indian guy who's been cooking at Sunda, and he's been cooking beautiful Indian food from his home, I think, in the first lockdown, and now he's doing it out of the Windsor Hotel, which is the owner of Sunda. And yeah, I agree. Like, it is very inspiring to see people trying new things, but also I think a lot of people really leaning on their own heritage and, just creating things for Melbourne and the rest of Australia that it would be great for us all to know more about. So yeah, regional Indian food is something I'm a little bit obsessed with, so I love that one particularly.
And it just goes to show like how great the hospitality community is. It's no one ever stops, and everyone's always out there backing each other, always encouraging each other to do more and more, and we're all interested to see what the next person's doing. There's never anyone kicking down on other people, which is great.
What about reflecting on the way things have been and perhaps using that as a spur to make change in the future?
I think, I think everyone in hospitality knows that, hospitality 20 years ago is definitely not what it is now, which is great. I've never really liked to dwell on what hospitality was. I think everyone knows, we've all heard about it a million times, especially, starting our apprenticeships or getting into the industry at any point. It's a really hard place to be. And, juggling your mental health on top of, the grueling work that it is really difficult. I've done some, quite heavy reading over the past couple of days while being in quarantine, and Beyond Blue actually have some great framework for mental health plans, which is great. So, I mean, for any businesses kind of, in that question of how do I make my workplace more mentally healthy for my staff, and to try and create better environments for them, Beyond Blue was a great place to start. They have a really good little PDF on there that's about the 7 actions to help create a mentally healthy workplace. So I think just approaching that and having a look at that is a really good start.
Okay, what are some of the actions or the things that you think could make workplaces more healthy?
I think number one is improving the understanding of mental health, which I think a lot of people, have a very large misconception of. I know that I always kind of push my anxiety just to the back of my mind and just try to keep carrying on, and it does build up, but I just don't really think it's much, and you keep throwing it down, thinking it's nothing, but it does actually build up and take its toll on you. So I think business leaders and mentors, if they can help their staff understand what mental health issues are, things like depression and anxiety, and that they actually entail a lot more than what we think, I think that's a really good place to start. And always trying to promote positive mental health and well-being. So, some of those things can be encouraging staff to work on tasks together, or, discussing ideas and sharing skills. I think briefing and debriefing as a group, and also one-on-one, is a really good thing to do in kitchens. There's a lot of places that don't do that, but if you have a bad service and there's no more discussion about it after the initial bollocking at that point in time, then you go home and you're kind of reflecting on that, and you don't really know what went wrong and you don't know how to fix it. And then that same thing happens the next day, and then all of these things keep building up and building up, but you don't know how to fix these things. I think it can take a huge toll on someone and ultimately affect how they work in a workplace.
I can imagine that would be a really massive thing. And people might go away from a situation and have completely different readings of what actually happened. Like one person might think there was just the worst thing and they really stuffed up, but then perhaps the person who's like supervising them didn't really think it was such a big deal. So I guess that sort of debriefing and just calibrating, well, how bad was it? What was it? How bad was it? How do we fix it? How does it not happen again? And how do we all feel okay about it going forward? Is that the sort of stuff you're talking about?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you always have to have a connection with your staff as well. You can't just think that like one approach is going to be the exact same for everyone. You can't just talk to 10 people in one room and assume everyone's going to have the same reception of it. I think if there's someone in your kitchen who might be a bit more introverted, I think you need to actually have a bit more of a one-on-one approach with them, and talk to them and actually see how they're feeling independently, because there's a lot of people out there that will just kind of take it on the chin and carry on and not really think it's going to build up when it actually does.
And tell me more about this idea of setting people to work on tasks together. Is that something that you think doesn't happen enough in many workplaces?
I think in larger kitchens, we were very fortunate at Oakridge where we were always working on everything together, always bouncing ideas off of each other, which was great. But, you look at some bigger kitchens where you might have 30 or 40 staff in there. I think it's very hard to get people to actually work on projects, because, you'll have your development team, but outside of that, everyone's just in there as foot soldiers, just getting it done, and not really much else to it.
And I guess if you feel like you are just that cog in a wheel, then you feel less valued as an individual as well.
That's right. You end up just feeling like a bit of a robot. You're just doing the same thing day in, day out. And, when there's so many people in the kitchen, it's kind of hard to get recognition at the same time. When you're battling it out with, trying to get recognition with 30 other people, it can be difficult and take a huge toll.
So I can sort of hear, perhaps some more senior kitchen people on my shoulders saying, well, not everyone can have the glory, you got to work up to that. Like, what are some sort of practical ways that people can feel valued as individuals but still play that team role in a kitchen environment?
Good question. I think it's always good to give people certain tasks. As a manager, I think, if someone came up to me and said, all right, I want you to try out this recipe, kind of really sharing that load with everyone, and setting people individual tasks at the same time that they can then approach their peers and go, hey, what do you reckon about this? I've been set this task by the boss, and I really want to make it good. So I think just starting small and giving people little tasks here and there, they might not be a great deal. You might not get put in a good food guide or anything for it, but I think for your own self-gratification, just knowing that, I've actually been asked to do this because they trust me and they want me to progress in my career and have some self-motivation. I think that's great.
That's also really nice what you say, like if you are given that task, that you would then go and talk to your workmates about it and sort of bring people in. So I guess at every step it's this idea of people not just staying in their lane, but as well as, you've got to get the job done, but it's about sharing across channels as well as up and down those structures for that mutual enrichment, where everyone feels like they're progressing.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah, sounds really good.
Yeah, and everyone together, and just try and share that load, which is good.
Okay. Have you talked to your mum specifically about restaurant environments, and has she given you any particular insights from her experience about, is she like shocked that things work a certain way in hospitality and thinks, oh, that should be like this?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's hard to. I guess that's what I'm trying to do with Eat the Issue, is break that trend of, oh, that's the way it is in hospitality, because it shouldn't be like that. We should all be treated equally and with the utmost respect and care. So sometimes, when you go home to mum and go, oh, like, you wouldn't believe what happened at work today, and she goes, oh my God, like, how do they get away with that? How can anyone make my son upset? And you kind of just go, well, it's just the way it is. But I think there is no room for that anymore. There is no, that's the way it is. It's a real Gordon Ramsay thing to say. It's because there is no that the way it is anymore, because we just need to always be moving forward, and that's the beauty of hospitality. It's always an evolving thing. So there's no reason for us to be stuck in one spot and it's my way or the highway.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Do you I know that your next role is incredibly top secret, and I can't twist your arm at this distance, so you won't tell me. But is it a more senior position than you've had in the past?
Yeah, I have taken a sous chef position, which I'm really excited for. I think I have a lot to learn. And I was actually having a chat to mum the other night pretty much about this exact conversation we're having now, and things that, I would kind of like to implement when managing people, not as a whole, but, as individuals, and having that connection with each other. So I think I'm really fortunate to always have mum there, and just to kind of learn not so much the do's and don'ts, but the hows, which is really great.
Well, so what are you going to do? Like, what are your aspirations for being a manager in your new role?
Like I was saying before, I think debriefing and briefing are some things I'm really going to include in my structure. And pretty much everything I've actually been talking about. I think setting tasks for people individually is really important. That's something I had done throughout my apprenticeship that my bosses had set for me. So I felt like that was a really good way to help staff progress. Some other things, I think having a social aspect as well is always great. You can't just, it is good to always keep it professional and, keep things at work and to not kind of twist people and be their friends, but also be their bosses at the same time. I think you just need to make sure you have that definitive line between that, because I think, I have had that experience where, you would hang out with your managers outside of work and you'd be best mates, and then you'd get to work and say something would go wrong and you'd get in trouble, and then you'd go like, what the hell? I thought we were friends, kind of thing. So I think making sure you have that definitive line, but also making people comfortable that when something is going wrong, they can come and approach you.
Yeah, I imagine that could be a really tricky balance sometimes, especially as people get promoted in the same kitchen. Perhaps you were in a similar role and then suddenly one person's the other person's boss. That must be a tricky thing to juggle.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think just making sure you do have that work-life balance with not just yourself, but with your staff, and just letting them know they can always come to you like a friend, but when you're at work, you are their boss at the same time.
Yeah. What about outside of the industry? Do you think it's important that you've got interests that aren't just related to restaurants?
Absolutely. I think, being physically healthy and mentally healthy go hand in hand. I don't think you can have one without the other. So I think always taking part in some form of exercise is always going to have a positive change on your mental health. And I think it's always great to have a disconnect from work, because hospitality, especially being a chef, I always find it really hard on my days off to not cook or not, try and teach myself new things within hospitality, which nothing wrong with it, but you kind of feel like you're always working. So to have that disconnect, like this year I've started playing a lot of golf, with friends, with friends who aren't in the hospitality industry. So it's great to go and be with them, and they don't know what's going on with hospitality, and I don't really know what's going on with their industry. So you can just have that disconnect, and you don't have to talk about work, and all you have to think about is hitting a hole in one. So
have you hit a hole in one?
Oh, I've gotten close. No, I haven't.
Really?
I wish.
That's great.
Yeah.
George, is there anything else that you want to share with us today?
I think we've covered everything. I'm really grateful for you having me on today, Dani. It's been great to kind of have a chat with you about things and the future of mental health in hospitality and the food and beverage industries as well.
Yeah, thanks, George. I think, I've talked to so many different people over these 2 weeks of talking about mental health and hospitality. And I think it's really, I'm really grateful to you for bringing the perspective of a young chef who's, you've had, very good experience in the industry, but you've obviously got so many years ahead of you. And it's just really encouraging to think that you're going to be a leader coming through. You've got such a great basis, and you've got such a great mum. I love hearing a young man speak so fondly of his mother. It's so nice.
Oh, I love it. I love her dearly. That's one thing I'm really going to miss. Being away from home is being able to just, pop over to mum's whenever, things are tough, and always having her there. So her name's Rae Bonney. If anyone wants to look her up, she does some really amazing work. So, thank you.
What does she cook for you when you go home?
Oh, she makes a mean meatloaf. It's the go-to meal. It's the birthday meal, death row meal, all the meals. It's if I had mum's meatloaf, the last meal of my life, I'd die a very happy man.
Great. Well, George, I really wish you all the best with the new job. When you're allowed to talk about it, let us know, and we'll tell the we'll tell the Dirty Linen crowd. But yeah, thank you so much for being part of our mental health and hospitality fortnight. It's been a real pleasure to have a chat.
Unreal. Thank you, Dani.
This is Dirty Linen, and I'm Dani Valent. We air the issues that the hospitality industry finds hard to talk about. We spend a week thrashing around each issue, hearing from different people with unique perspectives. We want to hear from you as well. If you have something that needs to be said about a topic, get in touch so we can include your perspective. Contact us at dirtyLinen@deepintheweeds.com.au or hit us up on Insta at Dirty Linen Podcast. We can't wait to hear from you.
This is a Deep in the Weeds production.